We've had loads of questions, Jay, from people asking about the connection between having albinism and having other medical conditions. So, for instance, if there is a link between albinism and autoimmune diseases, kidney diseases, connective tissue diseases, I don't know the answer to that. Have you got any comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of things. We do get asked this quite a lot. The things, so there's a few points to it. Firstly, there are lots of different reasons to have albinism. Broadly, we talk about syndromic and non-syndromic albinism. It's just a silly medical term. By non-syndromic albinism, what we mean is someone has hair, eyes, and skin problems that we've talked about lots of times, but they don't have problems elsewhere in the body. So that's non-syndromic. So when we talk about oculocutaneous albinism, most people with that are non-syndromic. When we talk about ocular albinism, we talk about non-syndromic, etc. Then there's a group of people who have what we call syndromic albinism, which are usually these rarer conditions with great long names like Hermansky-Pudlak, Griscelli, Jediak-Higashi. There's others, but these are the long fancy ones that we've all vaguely heard about, but you're not quite sure what they are. And that's because they're much rarer forms of syndromic albinism. And by syndromic, what we mean is there's something else going on elsewhere as well, which is seemingly unrelated to hair, skin and eyes. So, for example, some of those conditions have problems with clotting, so blood clotting, so propensity to bruising. Some have increased risk of infection, lung disease later in life, etc. So there's a whole list, which is, I think, where some of these questions come from. I think the most important thing to remember is that the syndromic forms, so the things associated with other stuff that we don't talk about all the time, are much rarer. And I do mean much, much rarer. It depends on which part of the world you're from. But in my part of the world, where we have quite a big mix of ethnic origins, in fact, it's probably less than 1 in 100, maybe less than 2 in 100 people who actually have or might have one of those conditions as their cause of albinism. So they are really rare. Having said that, you're absolutely right. Some of those things on that list can be associated with albinism, but that's the way that they're associated. So for the vast majority of people, particularly those who have a genetic diagnosis and know that they have, for example, OCA1, or they have ocular albinism, or OCA2, etc., those things are irrelevant because they're linked to different types of albinism. So it's a bit of a complicated answer, but essentially there are some forms of albinism where you can have other stuff that we don't talk about all the time on this kind of series of videos. But the reason we don't is that they are much, much rarer. So it's not relevant for most people. The other point that's really important is that whenever anyone has a condition or a diagnosis, particularly a genetic one, what tends to happen, and I've seen this for decades, what tends to happen is everything that ever happens for that person, you're always thinking, is it related to the thing? Is it related to that condition that I have? And that's not unique to albinism by any means. So I've even had, just to give an example, I've even had parents say to me, look, my son, he used to be really good at eating vegetables, and now he won't eat his vegetables. Is that related to his albinism in some way? And I've actually had that question, seriously. So that's an extreme end, but it's really tempting to try and attach everything. The third point, which is quite important as well, is that just because you have albinism doesn't mean you're immune to every other condition that can happen. You can absolutely get all the ailments that everybody else can get. So I guess it's important to be mindful that albinism isn't the whole of you. We've said this so many times. Albinism isn't the whole of you. If you have, a rash on your leg, or you have problems with your toes, or you think you might have a bladder infection, anything in your body, just think, I'm just like everyone else. I can absolutely get all the things that everyone else can get, and there's a really strong chance this is not related to my albinism. So I don't want to go into too many specifics about autoimmune disease, hearing, blood clotting, all that kind of stuff, because they're all quite nuanced. So the answer is always, to some degree, yes, some of these things could be related to albinism, but for the vast majority, and for the vast majority of things, it usually isn't. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I guess even if they were, and people hadn't realised that yet, you'd still treat it in exactly the same way. So if you've got an autoimmune disease, I don't know, if you've got like an underactive thyroid or something, that'd still be treated in the same way, regardless of if you had albinism or if you didn't have albinism, in the same way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that speaks to another point. I probably should have said that. So it's in some respects you've got to think about, does it matter? In this instance, does it matter if this is related to my albinism or not? And the answer is, as you say, fairly often no.
Okay, cool. That's good, because I think people kind of get a bit worried and a bit panicked and thinking that their doctors won't understand because they've got a rare condition and then they've got something else on top of it, and it will all be confusing. But
yeah, that's true.
You're just your own person, and you just then happen to have something else going on.
Yeah, that's true for the vast majority of situations, I think. Yeah, totally.
If you have got something else going on, you need to go to your doctor and get it checked out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you've got any queries, anything you're worried about, certainly from the medical point of view, GP is a good first port of call. Absolutely.